The fluorescent ceiling lights flickered once more before settling into their usual cold glow, casting a pale light over the stillness of Sal's diner. The wall clock ticked toward 6:30 a.m., marking the start of a new day, yet the air still carried the lingering scent of last night's roast beef and the sharp tang of industrial-strength cleaner. It was a familiar smell, one of survival, of repetition, the kind Emily had lived with for the past 3 years. The young woman stood alone in the quiet kitchen, brushing a loose strand of brown hair from her cheek and tying on her faded blue apron with the kind of practiced motion that had long since become automatic. The polyester uniform itched against her skin, but she had grown used to it. Getting used to something, she thought, was like surrendering to a life you never chose, unhappy with it, but too exhausted to fight. "Order up," Hank's gravelly voice called from behind the kitchen door, snapping Emily out of her thoughts. He was the head cook, a man whose voice had the coarse texture of sandpaper after years of smoking and early mornings. Emily nodded, stepped over, and picked up 2 hot plates. Her hands moved deftly, balancing them across her arm like a seasoned performer, the skill honed through thousands of orders and endless hours on her feet. No one in the diner's regular crowd knew Emily had once been an honors student in business. Her degree now sat in a drawer, gathering dust, a bitter reminder of dreams that never came true. Every time she opened that drawer, it felt like the diploma smirked back at her for still trying to reach for a better future. Customers began trickling in, like clockwork. There was Ted, the retired postal worker who always ordered rye toast and scrambled eggs, then complained about both. The young couple in the corner who shared a plate of pancakes, giggling like the world held no burdens. The group of construction workers in bright orange safety vests who brought the November chill in with them. They gathered at the usual big table, and life went on as if nothing had changed. "Coffee, Emily. Black as my soul today," Martha muttered as she slumped onto the bar stool. She was a night shift nurse from County General, with dark circles under her eyes and hair matted with sweat from a long shift. Emily nodded, filling her usual ceramic mug. "Rough night?" she asked, softly. "The new interns can't tell a real heartbeat from a false alarm." Martha grunted, cracking a tired smile, the kind only people accustomed to life and death could make. By around 10 a.m., the breakfast rush began to wind down. Emily wiped the tables in a slow, mechanical rhythm. Her mind kept drifting to the electric bill at home, the one with the red final notice stamped across the top like a sentence. She considered picking up an extra weekend shift. After all, no one was waiting for her on Saturday night. Rick, the manager, appeared suddenly from his office, clipboard in hand and tension in his shoulders. He was the type of man who always looked suspicious, with a greasy comb-over that fooled no one and an expression that suggested the world was out to get him. "Emily, table 3 needs a coffee refill," he barked, even though she already had the pot in hand before he spoke. "Already on it," she replied, forcing a polite smile, not because she felt cheerful, but because that was the only way to survive here. The doorbell jingled, followed by a gust of cold air sweeping through the diner. Emily turned her head, expecting a familiar sight, a freelancer looking for a quiet place to work, maybe an old man there for the newspaper. Instead, a man stood frozen in the doorway. He looked lost, unsure of where he was. Tall but hunched, with disheveled white hair, as though his trembling hands had combed through it repeatedly. His flannel shirt was buttoned crookedly, and his light jacket was on backward, the tag sticking out visibly at the collar. Emily's heart skipped a beat, not out of fear, but because of something vague and unsettling that stirred inside her. Something was about to happen, something that would change everything. But it wasn't his appearance that caught Emily's attention. It was his eyes, pale blue and clouded with confusion, scanning the room as if searching for something precious that had slipped through his memory. "My wallet, where's my wallet?" he muttered, his thin fingers tapping his coat pockets with growing urgency. "I know, I brought it." Other customers glanced up briefly, then quickly returned to their food and conversations. Rick emerged from behind the counter, his face already fixed in the stern expression he reserved for trouble. "Sir, if you're not ordering, you'll need to leave," he called out coldly, not even bothering to approach. The old man flinched. His confusion quickly turned into fear. I can't remember where I put it." His voice cracked, and Emily, holding the coffee pot, felt a knot tighten in her chest. Something about the man's disoriented state struck too close to home, like a memory knocking on a door she'd locked away. Her grandfather had been like that before the diagnosis, Alzheimer's. She set the pot down and walked over slowly. "Hello there," she said warmly, her voice soft and steady. "It's pretty cold outside, isn't it? Why don't you come sit for a bit and warm up?" There was no pressure, no judgment, just a gentle offering in a world that George the man was slowly forgetting. "I think someone's waiting for me," he said, eyes darting again with desperate hope. "But I don't remember who." His hands still trembled, still checked the empty pockets, like the wallet was just barely out of reach. "That's okay," Emily replied. "Why don't we sit down first? Sometimes, when we relax, things come back to us." She introduced herself. "I'm Emily. It's nice to meet you." After a pause, the man nodded. "George?" "My name's George." Even that seemed like a struggle to recall. Emily gently helped him out of his jacket, fixing it so it faced the right way, and hung it neatly on a hook by the booth. George sat with a quiet sigh, as if letting go of a weight no one else could see. "What day is it today?" he asked, his fingers toying with the laminated menu. "It's Thursday, November 12th, Emily replied. "Thursday," he repeated, tasting the word. "I thought it was Sunday, church day." Emily's chest ached. The signs were too familiar now. Confusion, lost sense of time, misplaced belongings. She had seen this decline before, and it never got easier. "George, would you like something to eat? We're kind of famous for our apple pie," she offered, her voice light and calm, even as she felt Rick's burning gaze from behind the counter. "I don't have my wallet," George said again, this time with quiet shame. "That's all right," Emily said with a soft smile. "First piece is free for first-timers." It was a lie, but a kind one, because sometimes kindness doesn't need permission. As she walked back to the kitchen, Rick's glare followed her like a nail driven into her back. He gestured toward a new family that had just walked in, clearly irritated. But Emily pretended not to notice. A slice of pie wouldn't bankrupt Sal's diner, but it might help a man find the last piece of himself still holding on. What she didn't notice was the subtle shift in the diner's atmosphere. In a quiet corner, a sharply dressed man lowered his newspaper just enough to watch her. His gaze followed every move she made with a calculated intensity. He pulled out a small notebook and began to write. The table had been cleared, the pie was on its way. But what Emily couldn't have known was that this one small act of kindness, simple, quiet, and against the rules, was the very moment that would alter the course of her entire life. Emily returned to George's table with a steaming slice of apple pie and a cup of freshly brewed coffee. She gently placed the plate in front of him, immediately noticing the subtle tremble in his hands, not just the shake of age, but of uncertainty and fear. Not fear of the world, but of being forgotten by it. "Here you go, George," she said gently, her voice as soft as morning sunlight. "The pie just came out of the oven. It's still warm." Then she slid into the seat across from him, just for a moment since the diner had quieted down. George stared at the slice of apple pie, his gaze seeming to pierce through time. "My daughter used to bake apple pie. Susan." His voice trailed off, distant, like a radio stuck between stations, struggling to tune into the right memory. "Is Susan waiting for you somewhere today?" Emily asked softly, watching his trembling hands try to steady the fork. George was quiet for a moment. I think I'm supposed to meet someone important." He brought the fork to his lips, took a bite, and for a fleeting moment, his face lit up. The taste sparked a flicker of joy inside the fading maze of his memory. "It's good, but my wife made it better. Margaret, 52 years together." "That's beautiful," Emily replied gently, noticing how he spoke of his wife in the past tense. 52 years, an entire lifetime of love and shared history. "She passed," George whispered, his gaze drifting toward the window like he was hoping to catch a glimpse of the past. 2 winters ago, or maybe 3. He tapped his temple with a thin, trembling finger. "It's all jumbled in here." From behind the counter came Rick's not-so-subtle throat-clearing. His eyes flicked from the wall clock to a newly arrived couple, silently urging Emily to get moving. She nodded briefly, but didn't rush off. "Take your time with that pie," she said, offering a warm smile and resting her hand lightly over his wrinkled one, a small touch meant to offer comfort. "I'll be right back." While Emily bustled to help the new customers, she kept glancing back at George. He ate slowly, sometimes pausing with his fork mid-air, frozen in the grip of a lost thought. Once he softly called out, "Margaret," before catching himself, cheeks flushing with embarrassment. "Your special guest is still enjoying his free lunch," Rick muttered sarcastically as Emily passed with her notepad. "We're not running a charity here." "He's confused, Rick. I think he might be in the early stages of Alzheimer's or dementia," she replied, her voice quiet but firm. "I couldn't just kick him out." "Not our problem. Call social services next time," Rick snapped. "We're a business, not a nursing home." Emily pressed her lips together and said nothing. She understood his point, but she didn't agree. Sometimes doing the right thing wasn't about what was allowed. And without compassion, this place was just a machine, cold and heartless. Despite the chaos, Emily returned to George's table whenever she had a spare moment. Each time he looked at her as if seeing her for the first time, relief and gratitude glowing in his eyes. "My son Thomas is coming," he told her during one visit. "Today, I think. Or maybe tomorrow." "Is Thomas the one you're waiting for?" she asked, refilling his coffee for the 3rd time. "Smart boy, my Thomas," George said proudly. "He runs the whole company now. Started in the mailroom, you know." He launched into the story, repeating parts, but each telling radiated love and a father's unshakable pride. At the register, Martha, the familiar night shift nurse, was settling her bill. She caught Emily's eye and gave a subtle nod toward George. "Early-stage Alzheimer's?" she asked quietly. Emily nodded in response, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "That's what I think, but honestly I'm not sure what to do. He doesn't seem to know where he's going or who he's looking for." Marta sighed, her face creased with concern. "My ward's full of folks like him, lost, can't even remember their own names. Have you checked if he has ID, emergency contact?" Emily shook her head, her voice dropping. "I haven't had the chance. He's only mentioned his son, Thomas. Try to see if there's a phone number." And Emily, Martha gave her shoulder a light squeeze. "You're doing a good thing. Most people wouldn't bother." As noon approached, the lunch rush swept into Sal's diner like a tidal wave. The doorbell chimed non-stop, becoming a kind of background noise. Emily hustled between tables, seating guests, taking orders, pouring coffee, addressing complaints, her professional smile never fading, even as exhaustion crept into her bones. Every time she passed George's table, she could feel Rick's glare cut into her like a blade, unspoken but loud in its disapproval. Yet she kept returning when she could. She checked on him, spoke gently, and kept his coffee full. When she came to clear his now empty pie plate, George suddenly murmured, "I should go. Someone's waiting for me." Emily looked up, her heart tightening. "Do you know where you're supposed to go?" George's face twisted with confusion, like a child who'd lost his favorite toy. I can't remember." Her decision came instantly, instinctively. Emily pulled a chair closer to his table and sat down beside him. "Why don't we wait a little longer? It's cold out there. Maybe whoever you're waiting for will call." George patted his coat pockets again, eyes bewildered. "I don't have a phone." "That's okay. You can stay here until something comes back to you," she said, her voice steady even though her heart was pounding, because she knew deep down that this moment would change something, for him and for her. Rick's sharp voice sliced through the moment. "Emily, table 7 needs service now." He stood there with arms crossed, foot tapping, eyes like ice. Emily stood quickly and headed for table 7, leaving George behind. Alone again. What she didn't know was that, in a shadowed corner of the diner, the sharply dressed man had seen everything. He gave a subtle nod to himself and kept writing, his pen scratching faster across the pages of his notebook. The diner hit full chaos. Every table was packed, orders piled up, plates clattered, voices overlapped. Emily was a blur of motion, her feet aching, her mind constantly pulled between customers and the corner where George sat, lost in a war with his own mind. "Where's my chicken salad sandwich?" barked a woman in a sharp business suit, checking her watch with irritation. "I only have 20 minutes for lunch." "Coming right up," Emily called, rushing to the kitchen. Inside, Hank was drenched in sweat, flipping burgers with tense, practiced speed, while cursing under his breath. "Table 12 still doesn't have their order," Emily shouted, trying not to sound panicked. "I've got 2 hands, not 20, Hank snapped, slamming patties onto the grill. "And we're short a prep cook today." In the middle of the chaos, Emily's eyes flicked to George, just in time to see him trying to stand. He swayed slightly, eyes wide with fear. He didn't know where he was, or why he was there, and Emily's heart skipped a beat. In that moment, amid the whirlwind of orders, complaints, and commands, what scared her most wasn't the risk of Rick reprimanding her or even losing her job. It was the thought of letting someone like George, lost and fragile, walk out those doors and vanish forever into a world that no longer made sense to him. Emily quickly apologized to the impatient woman waiting for her chicken salad, then turned and rushed back toward George. He was unsteady on his feet, one hand lightly gripping the edge of the booth, his eyes wide and filled with confusion. "George, are you all right?" she asked gently, placing a steady hand on his shoulder and helping him back into his seat. I need to, he murmured, his clouded eyes straining as though trying to find light in the fog of his own mind. "What time is it?" "Little past 1 o'clock, Emily replied, her voice a soft blanket over the unraveling threads of his memory. "I had an appointment." "I'm sure I did," George said, furrowing his brow in frustration, trying to retrieve something just out of reach. "Do you remember who it was with?" she asked. His face fell, like a child struggling with a question on a test they should know but don't. "I should know. Why can't I remember?" His voice rose unexpectedly, slicing through the ambient noise of the diner and turning heads. "It's okay, George," Emily said, crouching slightly so her voice could wrap around him in calm. "Sometimes our memories just need a moment. Let's stay here a little longer. Maybe it'll come back to you." A loud crash from across the diner pulled her attention. Someone had knocked over a glass of water. Emily stood up quickly, hurried to the spill, and began wiping up the mess when Rick's voice cracked through the air like a whip. For God's sake, Emily, table 12 still doesn't have their food, we've got water all over the floor, and you're busy playing babysitter. His face was flushed red with fury, eyes burning. Got it, just give me a second, Emily said, her voice edged for the first time. She rushed to the kitchen, grabbed the waiting order, and delivered it with an apologetic smile that felt more like a grimace. For the next hour, she was a whirlwind, serving tables, filling coffee, clearing dishes, all while casting quick, concerned glances toward George's booth. Sometimes she could only stop by to drop off a fresh pot of coffee, offer a quick word, a small smile, and then disappear into the crowd of hungry, impatient customers. Some diners grew irritated by the delays. Tips began to shrink. But there were others, those with softer hearts, who quietly watched George and noticed the way Emily never forgot him, never left him behind. They understood. They empathized. Eventually, the storm passed. The tables thinned out. Emily stood in the middle of the diner, let out a deep breath as if surfacing from an ocean. She rolled her shoulders, aching like they were made of stone. George was still there, sitting silently staring down at the empty table before him. "George, would you like anything else to eat?" Emily asked, approaching softly, her voice no more than a whisper. He looked up, and in that moment, a rare spark of recognition flickered in his eyes. "You're very kind, just like my daughter." Emily smiled. "Thank you. That's a wonderful compliment." But the warm moment was cut short by Rick's voice, sharp as a razor. "My office. Now." No explanation, no room for protest, just a command. Emily laid her hand gently on the table. "I'll be right back," she told George. Rick's office was the size of a storage closet, thick with the scent of old paper and disinfectant. The door shut behind her with a cold, final click. "Sit," Rick said, pointing to the folding chair opposite his desk. Emily remained standing. "What do you think you're doing?" he said, voice low but dangerous. "Busiest lunch shift we've had all year, and you're chasing after some senile old man." "I was doing my job, taking orders, delivering food, cleaning up, and helping someone who needed help." Rick let out a hollow laugh. It sounded like wood splitting. "Helping? Your job is to serve paying customers, not take in strays." "He's not a stray, he's a person, Rick, a father, a husband, and he's lost. He needed someone, and I stayed. That's not a mistake." "Then you should have called social services, not used the company's resources for your bleeding heart." Rick pulled out a calculator, punching numbers in angrily. 1 slice of pie, 3 cups of coffee, and now a full lunch. You know what that is? Theft. You stole from this business." "Theft?" Emily burst out, her voice shaking. "You call that theft? Helping a confused elderly man is theft? That's compassion. That's dignity, something you clearly forgot a long time ago." Rick met her eyes, his voice now icy cold. "You don't own this diner. You don't get to decide who eats for free. And I just got 3 complaints today about slow service because you couldn't do your actual job." Emily bit her lip. Then, something inside her snapped. The pressure, the guilt, the injustice, it all erupted. "Then fire me." She hadn't planned to say it, but it came out clean, sharp, and final. The kind of truth that only rises from conviction. Rick paused, then smirked darkly. "Glad you said it. Saves me the trouble." He pulled a form from his drawer and slapped it onto the desk. "This is your official termination. Unauthorized comping of meals, neglect of duties, insubordination. You chose your path. This is the consequence." "It's not right," Emily whispered. Her voice was fading, but the fire inside her was not. He needed help. "And now you need a new job," Rick snapped, sliding the form across the table. The pen was already placed on top, like part of a well-rehearsed ritual. Her hand trembled as she picked it up, She stared at the line, termination, reason, policy violation, unauthorized use of company resources. Her heart ached, like something had been torn in half. She signed her name and with it let go of a part of herself. She unfastened her apron, folded it carefully, and placed it on the desk. A quiet farewell to the place she had given so much of herself to. "What about George?" she asked, eyes still fixed on the diner floor where the old man sat like a drifting cloud with no direction. "Not your concern anymore," Rick said curtly. "Collect your things and leave through the back. I don't want you disturbing the customers." Emily stepped out of the office, head held high, but inside she was free-falling. She paused by George's table. Bending down, she whispered, "I have to go now, but someone will help you, I promise." George looked up, his eyes foggy. "You're very kind," he said again, unaware of all that had happened. "A thank you." Like the last sunlight of the day, faint but still warm. In the back room, Emily packed her few belongings into an old canvas bag. Her final paycheck slip lay on the floor, forgotten, a reminder of the job she once fought to keep. She stepped out the back door into the biting November wind. No longer a waitress at Sal's diner, no longer sure of what came next. But strangely, she didn't feel regret. That night, Emily's small apartment felt larger than usual, not because of space, but because of the emptiness inside her. She curled up on the worn-out sofa, still wearing her black work pants, only having swapped her server shirt for a frayed sweatshirt. Dinner was a microwaved frozen meal that had long gone cold, sitting untouched on the table in front of her. The TV played some reality show in the background, but she wasn't watching. Her mind was still at Sal's, in the corner booth, where an elderly man sat alone, slowly unraveling from within. That morning she had a job, not a dream job, but one that paid the power bill, the rent, and occasionally allowed her to buy a coffee without checking the price first. Now all that remained was a final notice taped to the refrigerator, demanding payment within 2 weeks. What hurt wasn't just losing the job, but the injustice of it. She had been punished for doing the right thing. Was there even a place left in the world for simple human decency? A tear slid silently down her cheek, then another. She wiped them away quickly, almost angrily. Crying wouldn't pay the electric bill. Crying wouldn't get her a new job. She needed to be practical. Tomorrow she'd update her resume, start walking into diners and cafes around the neighborhood. Maybe that new coffee shop downtown was hiring. Her phone buzzed on the table, probably her mom calling like she did every Sunday evening. Emily didn't feel ready to fake a cheerful voice, but if she didn't answer, she'd just get a string of worried texts all night. She picked up without checking the caller ID. "Hello? Is this Emily Winters?" A calm, steady male voice came through, unfamiliar. Emily straightened. "Yes, this is she. Who's calling?" "My name is Thomas Berkshire. I believe you met my father earlier today." Emily's breath caught. "George. Is he okay?" she asked softly, her heart sinking. "He's fine, thanks to your kindness," Thomas replied, his voice lowering. "I also understand you were fired today for helping him." A flush of heat rushed to Emily's face. How do you know that?" "The owner you served today is standing outside your building," Thomas said. His tone wasn't angry, wasn't cold, just factual. "He'd like to speak with you, if you're willing." Emily rushed to the window, pulling back the curtain. A sleek black car was parked in front of the building. Standing next to it, a middle-aged man in a dark suit had a phone to his ear and was looking up at her window. "That's you?" she asked, her voice a mix of surprise and caution. "Yes. I apologize for the late hour and for not calling ahead. If you're uncomfortable, we can schedule something for tomorrow morning." Emily's thoughts spun like a whirlpool. George's son, A man, an owner of something, knew about what happened, found her, and was waiting outside. Everything was happening too fast, too strangely, but there was no threat in his voice. There was something very human, very real. "No, it's okay. I'll come down. Thank you. I'll wait." Emily hung up and stepped in front of the mirror. Her hair was messy, her eyes still red, her sweatshirt wrinkled. But behind all that, there was a flicker of something new in her reflection. A light in the eyes of someone who had just sacrificed everything to hold onto her humanity. Her face was still blotchy from crying. Her hair was a tangled mess, quickly brushed into some shape, stray strands still clinging to her forehead. She leaned over the bathroom sink, splashing cold water on her face, not to wake up, but to wash away the lingering shame and sorrow. Outside, the November night wind cut like ice as she stepped through the building's front door. Under the soft yellow glow of the street lamp stood the man, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a carefully tailored charcoal gray overcoat. His breath rose in soft white puffs in the cold air. Thomas Berkshire. He looked uncannily like George, the same pale blue eyes, but sharper and more resolute. He appeared to be in his early 50s, his salt and pepper hair adding to the thoughtful strength in his face. "Emily," he said, extending his hand gently. "Thank you for coming down. I'm Thomas Berkshire." The question escaped her lips before she could think. "How did you find me?" Thomas gave a small, apologetic smile. "I have certain resources. I hope you'll forgive the surprise." Emily folded her arms, bracing against the cold and her guarded instincts. "Is George okay? Did he get home safe?" "He did. He's with his caregiver now, thanks to you." Thomas gestured toward the sleek black car at the curb. "Would you mind if we talked inside? It's pretty cold out here, and I have something I'd like to share with you." Emily hesitated for just a moment, then nodded. Whatever was happening, she had nothing left to lose. Her job was gone. Her dignity had been challenged. All she had left was the truth. Inside the car, the warmth wrapped around her. It smelled faintly of expensive leather, the kind of scent you'd only find in luxury vehicles or executive boardrooms. Thomas settled into the driver's seat, but didn't start the engine. Instead, he turned to her, sincerity in his eyes. "First, I want to thank you for the compassion you showed my father today." His voice was steady and low, but rich with unspoken emotion. Emily shook her head. "Anyone would have done the same." "No, Emily, they wouldn't have," Thomas said firmly, as if stripping away any illusions. He pulled a tablet from inside his coat, unlocked it, and turned the screen toward her. On it was security footage from Sal's diner, footage of her helping George to his seat, bringing him pie, sitting with him briefly, checking on him in between her other tables. Emily froze. "Why do you have this? Why were you watching your father?" Thomas sighed, heavily like someone carrying too many memories. "Not just my father, Emily. I was watching everyone." Her heart pounded. "Everyone? What do you mean?" "You're sitting in the car with the man who owns the entire Sal's diner chain, all 47 locations across 5 states, and I am that owner." A wave of shock surged through Emily's chest. She had served pie to the father of the man who owned it all. She had been fired by a manager who had no idea that the owner himself was watching from the shadows. "So, that means—" Her voice faltered, clutching the edges of her old coat. "It means," Thomas continued, his voice equal parts serious and compassionate, "the man you served today isn't just outside your apartment." He paused and looked her in the eyes. "He's sitting right next to you, and I'd like to talk to you about your future." Emily sat in stunned silence, trying to absorb the magnitude of what he had just said. "You? You're the owner of Sal's diner?" Her voice was barely more than a breath. "Yes," Thomas replied. She turned to him, eyes narrowed, then pointed to the tablet he had just put away, the one that showed footage of every kind act she had done throughout the day. "But why? Why were you watching your father like that? Why follow me?" In the dim light of the car, Thomas's face came into focus, and for the first time she saw George in him, the same quiet sadness in his eyes, the slight tilt of the head when choosing his words. "It started 6 months ago," he began, his voice deepening, thickened by pain left unspoken. "My father was diagnosed with early-stage Alzheimer's. Everything changed after that. He used to be so sharp, so quick-minded. He built our first diner from the ground up after returning from Vietnam." A shadow flickered across his face. Watching him lose his memory piece by piece as if someone was slowly dismantling the man I'd always known was unbearable. Emily said nothing. She felt the weight of his grief press against her chest. 3 months ago he wandered off. We found him 4 hours later, sitting alone in one of our cells locations in Westbrook. Thomas's hands clenched slightly, but the way the staff treated him there. He paused, his jaw tightening as if choking back old rage. They treated him like a burden. No one offered help. One even laughed at his confusion. Emily felt a chill run through her. My father, the man who designed the chairs they sat on, who shaped the menu, who poured his soul into every detail, was treated like a nameless drifter. That was the moment I realized everything I'd been proud of in this company. Our supposed values of dignity, service, and compassion were just slogans on a wooden plaque. Thomas gave a bitter laugh. It had no joy in it. "Thought I was running a company with a soul. Turns out I was managing a cold machine designed only for profit." He tapped his fingers lightly on the steering wheel, a habit, clearly, when deep in thought. "So I decided to run a test. With his doctor's approval, I began taking my father to different branches. There was always someone nearby, watching over him, but never interfering. I observed how the staff reacted. And today, I sat in the corner of your diner, and I saw everything." The image of the man with the newspaper came back to Emily, the one she hadn't paid much attention to. Now she realized he was the owner. "You were testing your own employees?" she asked, half in admiration, half in disbelief. "Not their sales skills," Thomas replied. "Their humanity." He opened the tablet again and pulled up another video. "This was in Glendale," he said. The clip showed George approaching the counter, trying to explain he'd lost his wallet. The employee didn't even look at him, just pointed at a sign that read, "No purchase, no seating." Thomas swiped to another clip. "This one's from our flagship location in Portland." In the footage, George sat alone, clearly distressed. Employees walked by without acknowledging him. One even rolled her eyes when he asked a question. "In 17 different branches I brought my father to," Thomas said softly. "Do you know how many employees treated him with basic human decency?" He looked at Emily. 3. And only one. Just one. Went beyond what the job required. Sat with him, listened to him, made him feel like he was still a person. That one was you. Emily's throat tightened. Pride, pain, emotion. They all tangled together in her chest like a dam about to burst. She didn't know what to say, how to respond. But in that moment, she understood that the smallest things, a slice of pie, a gentle touch, a warm word, had the power to shake the foundation of an indifferent system. "I just did what anyone should do," Emily whispered, half wondering whether compassion even mattered in a world that seemed to care less and less. "That's exactly it," Thomas nodded, his gaze sharpening. "Everyone should, but they don't. You're the exception, Emily. We live in a time where efficiency is prized above empathy, where profit margins matter more than people. He straightened and pulled a small notebook from his coat pocket, the one Emily had glimpsed at the diner. I've gone branch by branch, documenting every behavior, every interaction, service speed, procedural compliance, responses under pressure, all the metrics we thought were important. He flipped through the notebook, pages filled with meticulous handwriting, like an investigator's report. But what good are metrics if we lose our humanity in the process? Emily watched him closely. She realized he wasn't just talking about his company, he was talking about himself. About a man who had lost his way in the pursuit of success, and only when his father began to fade did he realize how far he had wandered too. "Today I watched you," Thomas said, voice quiet again. "You served customers fast, efficiently, like a model employee. But with my father, you were something else entirely. You were human. Patient, gentle, respectful, even when Rick was breathing down your neck." Emily lowered her gaze. "He reminded me of my grandfather before he passed." Thomas nodded, like he knew that pain too well. "My father couldn't remember your name, couldn't remember what he ate, but he told me there was an angel in the diner today." A breath caught in Emily's throat. Her heart sank. Tears began to gather in her eyes, but she quickly turned away, swallowing hard. She didn't want to cry over a compliment. But it struck something deep, something that had gone unseen for so long, finally being acknowledged. "When I saw Rick drag you into his office," Thomas continued, "I knew what was coming. I almost stepped in. But I needed to let it happen. I had to see for myself, not just what my employees would do, but how broken the system I built had become." He looked out the window, the street lamp's reflection casting cracks of light across the glass. "We say we're a brand that serves communities, but it's just marketing. I got lost chasing growth and profits and forgot what really matters. People." Then he turned back to Emily, his eyes lit with a new resolve. "But that changes now, starting with you." "Starting with me?" Emily asked, unsure what he meant. "Yes," Thomas smiled, and for the first time since they met it was a real, warm smile. "Because you, Emily Winters, just showed me exactly what my company is missing." Silence filled the car. Emily could sense something was coming, more than a thank you, more than a compliment, a turning point. But she didn't expect much. She'd prepared herself to politely decline if all Thomas had to offer was her old job back, with maybe a small bonus as an apology. She also knew exactly what she wanted. "I don't need my server job back," Emily said, her voice suddenly firm, like someone peeling off an old layer of herself. "I know you mean well, and I'm grateful. But if your company culture is really as broken as you say, I'm not sure I want to belong to it anymore." Thomas looked at her, his eyes briefly surprised. Then he chuckled, softly, but with admiration. "That's a very good answer," he said. "And no, I wasn't planning to offer you your old job back." He reached into his inner jacket pocket and pulled out a business card. Emily took it, her fingers trembling slightly with curiosity. Embossed in silver lettering, Berkshire Restaurant Group, Corporate Headquarters, Portland. "I don't understand," she said, her eyes still fixed on the card. "Because I'm offering you an entirely new position," Thomas said. "Not as a server, as our new director of compassion training based at our corporate headquarters." Emily looked up, completely stunned. "The director of compassion training," she repeated, barely believing her own ears. "That doesn't sound like a real job." Thomas smiled gently and nodded. "Until about 4 hours ago it wasn't, but now it is. and the position starts with a salary of $90,000, 0 cents a year, plus full benefits. Emily's mouth parted slightly, her chest tightening with disbelief. $90,000, a figure so distant from her reality, more than triple what she'd ever earned at Sal's diner. "And I believe," Thomas continued, his tone no longer tentative but resolute, "you're worth every penny, if you can help me repair what's broken in this system." He turned toward her, fully facing her now, as if he were handing over more than a job, a mission. "Here's what I'm proposing," Thomas began, his expression bright with clarity. "You'll design and implement a new training program for all 47 branches, focused on building a culture of compassionate service, especially for vulnerable guests, the elderly, people with disabilities, those going through mental health crises." Emily felt her head spin. She shook it slightly, trying to stay grounded. "But I've never done professional training before," she said. "I have a business degree, yes, but I've never—" Thomas raised a hand, cutting her off gently. "I'm not looking for someone with training experience," he said. "I'm looking for someone with instinct, someone who understands what can't be taught in a handbook." He tapped his chest lightly. "Compassion doesn't come from a PowerPoint presentation. It comes from people who live it and can inspire it in others. And you, Emily, you have that. Clearly." He gestured toward the tablet. "I have dozens of internal documents, employee manuals, customer service protocols. None of them stopped my father from being ignored at 16 locations." Then he looked at her, his eyes so sincere that Emily felt breathless. "What you did today, that can't be written into a checklist. That's why I need you." Emily felt something rising inside her, a wave, powerful but not frightening, as if this was the moment she'd been quietly waiting for her whole life without ever daring to name it. "What would the job actually involve?" she asked, for the first time allowing herself to think beyond overdue bills. Thomas smiled, sensing the spark in her eyes. "We'd travel together to each location," he said. "You'd observe the current culture firsthand, then design training that's truly human, not the usual dry corporate stuff." He paused, then added with conviction, "You'd also work directly with the managers, including replacing those who don't align with our new direction." A flicker of steel flashed in his eyes, something Emily hadn't seen in him until now. "Rick, for example. He'll be receiving his termination notice tomorrow." "You're firing Rick?" Emily asked, surprised by how blunt it sounded. Thomas responded with calm, unwavering certainty. "I'm calling it a structural realignment. Anyone who believes kindness is a weakness in business has no place in leadership at my company." Emily leaned back, feeling the weight of what was being placed in front of her. This wasn't just a job offer. It was an opportunity to redefine how an entire company approached humanity. This is a lot to take in. "I understand," Thomas said, nodding. "Take the weekend to think about it. Call me Monday." He reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope, offering it to her. "In the meantime, this should help with any immediate needs." Emily opened the envelope and froze. Inside was a check for $5,000, 0 cents. "What is this?" she asked. "Severance," Thomas replied, "for wrongful termination. It's not charity, it's justice. What happened to you today was wrong. This is the least I can do to start making it right." Emily held the check, overwhelmed, trying to hand it back. "I can't accept this." "You can, and you will," Thomas interrupted gently, not allowing her to return it. "You didn't ask for this. You earned it." Emily looked at him, then down at the check. She felt something deeper beginning to bloom in her chest. Once again, she asked the question she hadn't dared speak aloud. Bill me? There are hundreds of people out there with qualifications, experience. Why not one of them? Thomas's face softened. There was something personal now, intimate, almost sacred in his expression. Because when my father was young, before he'd built anything, he hit rock bottom. One day, in complete despair, he wandered into a small diner. He paused, his voice dropped. A waitress gave him a free meal. He couldn't pay. She didn't ask any questions, no conditions, just a small act of kindness. But it changed his life. He never forgot that meal, Thomas said, his voice nearly a whisper. That's why he started Sal's Diner, to create a place where people, even at their lowest, could find food and just a little bit of human kindness. He turned his gaze toward the window, where the street lamps softly illuminated the empty sidewalk. And somewhere along the way, growing this company, I forgot that. I forgot that what makes Sal's Diner special isn't the menu or the profit margins. It's its heart. He looked back at Emily, his eyes glowing now, not just with conviction, but with something deeper. Something that sounded like a quiet plea from a son trying to make things right for his father. So, Emily, Thomas said, extending his hand, will you help me? Help me rebuild Sal's Diner into the place my father once dreamed it could be, a place that can touch people's hearts through the simplest acts of kindness? Emily looked down at his outstretched hand, then at the business card with her new title embossed in silver, Director of Compassion Training. The $5,000 0 cents check still rested in her other hand. A part of her still couldn't believe this was real. Just 24 hours ago, she was a waitress barely getting by, wondering whether kindness still had any value in the world. And now she had her answer. She took his hand firmly. I don't need the weekend to decide, she said, her voice clear and full of conviction. I accept. Thomas laughed, not just with joy but with relief. Welcome to the Berkshire Restaurant Group, Director Winters. As Emily stepped out of the car, the cold night air brushed against her skin, but it couldn't penetrate the new armor of purpose she now wore. She lifted her gaze toward the stars, glittering above her aging apartment complex, the same sky she used to look up at after every shift, wondering if she was on the right path. Tonight, she didn't need to wonder anymore. She thought of George, the lost man in a fading world who, without knowing it, had helped her find her way. She thought of her grandfather, the man who once smiled while telling stories, only to forget her name in his final years. And she thought of the countless others sitting in diners, waiting rooms, and bus stations, people who just needed one glance, one gentle question, "Are you okay?" to remember they weren't invisible to the world. Her small act, a free slice of pie, a light touch on a wrinkled hand, turned out to be anything but insignificant. It had been the key to a door she never even knew she had the right to open. Tomorrow, Emily would begin a new chapter, not to serve meals, but to plant seeds of compassion in every branch, every shift, every soul. A world where kindness wasn't the exception, but the standard. One meal, one smile, one human moment at a time.